At a lavish wedding filled with 300 guests, flashing cameras, and polished smiles, a pregnant woman stood only a few feet from the man who had destroyed her life. He had abandoned her, erased her from his future, and replaced her as though she had never mattered. But that still was not enough for him. In front of the entire room, he grabbed her dress and ripped it, certain that public humiliation would finally crush her. Instead, she straightened her back, looked him in the eye, and made one calm move that turned the room against him completely. What did she reveal that made the celebration go dead silent? The wedding invitation had not been addressed to Celeste. She had not been asked to come, had not been expected to show up, and had spent the better part of 3 days convincing herself she would not. She had a list of reasons, all of them sensible. She was 6 months pregnant. She owned exactly one dress that still fit over her stomach. She had $43 in her checking account and a half-eaten box of crackers on her kitchen counter. None of those things belonged anywhere near a ballroom filled with chandeliers and open bars and people who had never once had to choose between a copay and a full tank of gas. And yet, on a Thursday evening in late October, Celeste stood in front of her bathroom mirror, smoothing the front of a navy wrap dress and telling herself she was only going to look. The envelope sat on the kitchen table where she had left it for 3 days. It had arrived with no return address, no name on the outside, just her name written in handwriting she almost did not recognize until she did. The moment she placed it, her hands went still. Joel, Brennan's former financial assistant, let go without explanation 8 months ago, 3 weeks after Celeste had filed the first round of divorce paperwork. The timing had seemed like coincidence then. It did not seem like coincidence anymore. Inside the envelope were 4 pages of financial documents. Celeste was not an accountant, but she had worked 2 years in a billing department before she met Brennan, and she knew enough to understand what she was reading. Asset transfers dated 14 months ago, 8 months before Brennan had told her he wanted a divorce, and 6 months before he filed. A third-party LLC registered in Delaware, with Brennan listed as a silent partner under a name she almost missed on the second page. Income figures submitted to the court that did not match the figures on the documents in her hand. And a child. Nowhere in the 4 pages of the divorce agreement, not one line, not one clause, was there any reference to the child she was carrying. A child he had known about when he signed his name. At the bottom of the last page, a handwritten note on a torn strip of paper. You deserve to know the truth. J. She had read it 4 times. Then she folded everything back into the envelope and put it in the kitchen drawer next to the takeout menus. She made herself a cup of tea she did not drink. She sat on the couch for a long time looking at nothing in particular. Then she took the envelope out of the drawer and put it in her purse. There was a version of Celeste, the one from 3 years ago, the one who had believed, completely and without reservation, in the life she was building, who would have handled this differently. That version would have called a friend, would have cried, would have spent the 3 days between receiving the envelope and the wedding talking herself out of every possible response until exhaustion made the decision for her. That version of herself felt very far away now. Not like a previous chapter, but like a photograph of someone she used to know, same face, different eyes. The woman standing in front of the bathroom mirror on a Thursday evening in late October had learned things in the past 14 months that the woman in the photograph had not yet been required to learn. She had learned what it felt like to sign paperwork she did not fully understand, because the attorney on the other side of the table was better paid and less tired. She had learned what it felt like to watch a shared life be divided into columns, his and hers, asset and liability, and to understand, too late, that the columns had been arranged before she sat down. She had learned what it felt like to be 6 months pregnant and alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, listening to the city outside and thinking, this is not the story I was supposed to be in. But she had also learned something else, something quieter, harder to name, that had arrived not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of small ones. The morning she had made herself breakfast and eaten it slowly, without crying. The afternoon she had felt the baby move for the first time and had laughed, involuntarily, before the grief could get there first. The evening she had sat on the floor of the apartment with the financial documents spread around her and thought, with a clarity that surprised her, I am not confused. I know exactly what this is. She knew what this was. She picked up her purse and walked out the door. Joel met her at the side entrance at 6:45, pressed a laminated badge into her hand, and spoke quietly and quickly. "Arthur Langford is here," he said. "Table 4, VIP section, left of the stage. He has been asking questions about the Meridian deal for 6 weeks, the same deal where the asset figures do not line up. He does not know exactly what he is looking for yet. But if he sees those documents, he will." "Celeste," Joel said. His voice was steadier than his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I processed those transfers. I flagged them internally and was told to unflag them. And then I was let go." He paused. "And because you are 6 months pregnant," and he wrote a settlement that pretends that is not happening. Celeste looked at the badge in her hand. "Staff. Logistics support." She almost laughed, not bitterly, just at the specific absurdity of it. That this was what it had come to. A laminated badge and a kitchen corridor and a dress with a torn seam she had repaired herself 2 weeks ago and hoped no one would notice. "Go in through the kitchen corridor," Joel said. "Stay near the back. You do not have to do anything tonight. I just needed you to have the choice." She clipped the badge to her purse strap. She thought about what he had said, "You do not have to do anything," and understood that he meant it kindly, and that he was also wrong. Not because she had decided, definitively, what she was going to do, but because the choice itself was already in action. Showing up was already in action. Walking through that door was already an answer to a question she had been living inside for 14 months. She walked through the door. The ballroom was everything Brennan had always wanted and everything Celeste had once wanted alongside him. She stood at its edge and let herself feel that for a moment, not the grief of it, not the anger, but just the plain fact of it. She had loved this world once, had moved through rooms like this one with the ease of someone who belonged, or had learned well enough to pass, had stood at Brennan's side at dinners and galas and fundraisers, and felt, genuinely, that the life they were building together was worth the building. She had not been wrong to feel that. That was the thing she had needed the longest time to understand. She had not been foolish or naive or blind. She had loved a person who had, for a time, chosen to be worth loving. The fault was not in her seeing. The fault was in what he had chosen to become when the cost of being worth loving became inconvenient. She found a position near the back pillar and stayed still. That was when she noticed Arthur Langford. Table 4, left of the stage. Older man, mid-60s, silver-haired, in a suit that had clearly been made for him. Not laughing, not performing. Watching the room with the quiet attention of someone who had learned, over a long career, to read the difference between what a room was presenting and what it actually contained. His eyes moved across the floor and found hers. He held her gaze for exactly 1 second. Long enough. Celeste's hand moved to her purse. She had told herself she was only coming to look, to confirm, to decide. She had already decided. The ceremony was 40 minutes of choreographed tenderness that Celeste watched from the back pillar without feeling anything she had not already felt and processed and set down. She did look, once, at Whitley. The bride was genuinely beautiful, not in the way that money sometimes manufactured, but with a stillness that seemed to belong to her, a quality of presence that Celeste recognized, because she had once had something like it herself, before the past 14 months had required her to trade it in for something more durable. Whitley stood at the altar with her hands wrapped around Brennan's and her eyes on his face, and she looked like a woman who believed completely in the man in front of her. Celeste looked away. She knew that expression. She did not feel contempt for it. She felt the particular ache of recognizing oneself in someone who does not yet know what she knows, and the equally particular ache of knowing that what was coming could not be stopped, only, perhaps, arrived at with as much honesty as possible. Whitley found her first, during the reception. She stepped away from her bridesmaids and stopped when she saw Celeste, and the look on her face was not surprise exactly. It was the expression of someone who has been half expecting something without knowing what shape it would take when it arrived. "You are Celeste," she said. "Yes. He told me you were unstable, that you had been harassing him, that there was a protective order." A pause. "There is not one, is there?" "No, there is not." Whitley looked at her, at the dress, at the curve of her stomach, at her face. Something moved behind her eyes. The first quiet fracture of something that had been under pressure for longer than tonight. "I found your name in his phone 2 weeks ago," she said, almost to herself. "He said." She stopped, pressed her lips together. Then, like a door being carefully pulled shut, "I should get back." She walked away. Celeste watched her go and felt, unexpectedly, something close to sorrow, not for herself, but for the woman in the white dress walking back toward a life that had already, quietly, begun to come apart. She hoped Whitley was stronger than she looked. She suspected she was. Brennan saw her at 8:47. She had been watching him at intervals, tracking the pressure the way you track weather, not constantly, but enough to know when the front was moving. He was at the bar, occupying the room with the practiced ease of a man who had never once doubted his right to be its center. Then his eyes crossed the floor and found her, and the Scotch glass stopped halfway to his mouth. She did not look away. She watched him process its surprise, calculation, fear assembling itself into anger with the efficiency of long practice, and she felt something she had not expected to feel, which was a kind of calm, so complete it was almost impersonal. Not detachment, not numbness, just the solid, grounded stillness of a woman who has already made her decision and is no longer afraid of what comes next. He crossed the room, performing ease he did not feel. "You need to leave," he said. His voice was the voice she had heard 100 times, low, pleasant on the surface, the voice he used when he needed to be obeyed and preferred not to show that he needed it. "Right now, before this becomes something you cannot walk back from." She said nothing. "I do not know how you got in here, but I will have you removed. You are making yourself look desperate." "I am just standing here, Brennan." The absence of fear in her voice did something to his face that she had never seen before, a flicker of something that was not anger and not calculation, but something rawer than either. He had prepared for her to break. He had been so certain she would break. The certainty of it had been, she understood now, the foundation of everything he had done, the transfers, the settlement, the clause that pretended her child did not exist. He had built his entire strategy on the assumption that she could be made small enough not to matter. She was not small. She had never been small. He had simply needed her to believe she was, and for a time, grief and exhaustion had made that possible. "I am giving you a chance to walk out with your dignity intact," he said. "I appreciate that. I will let you know if I need it." He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he walked away, but he did not go back to the bar. He came back at 9:34. He came from her left, faster than before, stripped of every layer of performance, operating on the raw core of a man who had run out of patience for the pretense of civility. He stopped in front of her and dropped even the last pretense of his voice. "This ends now. You are leaving." "No," she said. "I am not." He grabbed her dress, the shoulder of it, fabric bunching in his fist, and pulled. The sound was sharp and clean and final, cutting through the nearest conversations like a blade. The music faltered, stopped. The conversations died. Celeste stumbled 1 step, caught herself against the pillar, and straightened. The dress had torn. She was standing. She did not cry. She did not make a sound. For a few seconds, she stood absolutely still, and in that stillness she felt, beneath everything, beneath the shock and the humiliation and the pulse loud in her ears, her child move, not a kick, a slow, deliberate shift, a small body rearranging itself with the unhurried certainty of something that does not yet know the world can be cruel, and is not afraid. She pressed one hand briefly to her side. Then she dropped it, and looked toward the stage. She had not planned a speech. She had prepared documents. She had prepared herself for the possibility of being asked to leave, of being embarrassed, of standing in a room full of people who had been arranged to believe in Brennan Carter, and finding no purchase for her truth anywhere in it. She had not prepared words because she had understood, somewhere beneath the planning, that the words would either be there or they would not, and that no amount of preparation would make them arrive if she was not ready to speak them, and that she would know when she was ready. She was ready. The MC gave her the microphone without being asked, or rather, she extended her hand and he placed it there, because the room had just watched a man tear the dress of a visibly pregnant woman, and there was no version of withholding the microphone that did not make everyone in the room complicit in what had just happened. She turned to face 300 people and felt, for the first time in 14 months, completely unafraid. "I am not going to take very long," she said. Her voice came through the speakers clean and even, without performance, without decoration. "Most of you do not know me. My name is Celeste. Until 14 months ago, I was Brennan Carter's wife." She did not pause for the sound that moved through the room. "I am not here to ruin a wedding. I am here because 3 days ago, I received documents that several people in this room have a right to know exist, and because tonight, I was given a very clear reminder that staying silent is no longer something I am willing to do." She opened the envelope. She held up the first page. "These documents show that 14 months ago, 8 months before Brennan filed for divorce, he transferred a significant portion of his personal assets into a third-party LLC registered in Delaware. The transfer was structured to ensure those assets would not be subject to division in divorce proceedings. The income figures he submitted to the court do not match his actual reported earnings during that same period." The room was the silence of 300 people paying complete attention. "And this," she raised, "the final page, is the divorce agreement he signed 7 months ago. I would ask anyone here to find, anywhere in these 4 pages, a single reference to the child I am carrying, a child he knew about when he signed his name." She set the pages on the nearest table. Arthur Langford stood up. Brennan stepped forward. "These documents are fabricated. She has been, Brennan." Whitley's voice was quiet and final. "Stop." He turned to look at her. "Just stop," she said again. And the quality of her stillness, the absence of doubt in it, removed the surface he needed to push against. Celeste walked to Whitley when it was over. She crossed the length of the room through the clusters of guests who made space for her, through the dissolving architecture of an evening that had been designed to celebrate one version of the truth and was now, irrevocably, something else, and she stood in front of the woman in the white dress and said, quietly, "So it was only for the 2 of them. I did not come here for him. I want you to know that." Whitley looked at her. Something in her face was opening, not collapsing, but opening, the way things open when the pressure holding them closed is finally removed. Her eyes were bright and steady. "I know," she said. Then, barely above a whisper, "Thank you." Celeste held her gaze one moment longer. Then she turned and walked to the exit. The night air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. She stood at the bottom of the entrance steps and did not look back at the lit doors behind her. At the sound of the ballroom becoming something other than what it had been planned to be, she pulled out her phone and requested a car and stood on the curb and let herself be still. The baby moved. A slow, rolling shift. A small body settling into itself with the easy confidence of something that has never been required to doubt its own right to exist. "I know," she thought. "We are going home." The car arrived. She settled into the back seat and let the door close, and watched the venue shrink in the mirror until the road curved and it was gone. She made tea when she got home. She sat on the couch in the quiet and felt, for the first time in a very long time, the specific peace of a woman who has stopped waiting for someone else to tell her she is allowed to take up space. She thought about tomorrow, about the name she had been turning over in her mind for 3 weeks, holding it up from different angles, testing its weight, seeing if it was strong enough to carry what she needed it to carry. It was. Outside, the city moved through its ordinary night. Inside the small apartment, in the quiet, a woman rested, and beside her, making itself known with a patient, certain rhythm of something moving toward the world. A new life settled, and waited, and was not afraid.